take us down to a more serious level, urgent matters happening in the world. So, Howard Thorpe.
Okay, thank you, Romain. Nobody gave me a brief for what to say at this meeting tonight, so I'm going to busk it basically, and I hope that I don't ramble too much. But basically, what I would like to get out of this meeting is a debate and a discussion. You know, not so much people up here talking, but all of us having a debate. I'd like to thank you, for those of you who voted for me as campaign coordinator and supported my campaign. And I'm not familiar with the mysteries of GPEX yet, but I'm sure it's an incredibly efficient organisation. I'm really looking forward to being a member of GPEX, and I'm sure by the end of next week we'll have things really moving forward as far as Green Party campaigns are concerned, because I know all I have to do is pull the right levers and everything will click into action, and very soon we'll have a really great campaigning party. Anyway, that's what I hope to try and achieve, if I possibly can. I'm going to do my damnedest to make the Green Party into a much more effectively campaigning party. But that's not really what I'm going to busk it about tonight. I mean, I've just been in the Green Growth meeting with Rupert and Neil Lawson, and that really kind of set me thinking about what to talk about. And I was talking to a couple of people outside conference earlier today. Just imagine that if you lived 20 years before the end of the Roman Empire. Now, Rome existed for roughly 1,000 years. Capitalism has been around for about 200 years. I mean, people will argue about exactly when it's, proper capitalism as we know today started and all that kind of stuff. But really, we're talking about something which has been around for 200 years. Now, if you've been in Rome 20 years before the end of the fall of the Roman Empire, and somebody had come along to you and said, the Roman Empire is going to end in 20 years' time, you'd have gone, what a load of rubbish. What a complete load of rubbish. You wouldn't have been able to believe it. There might have been one or two quite perceptive people who saw the writing on the wall and realised that the whole thing was beginning to fall apart. But the parallel I want to draw is between that and how we feel about capitalism today. Because if I was to tell you that capitalism won't be here in 20 years' time, you'd think I was talking rubbish. You know, you'd be kind of going, what? Because we've all grown up with this, we've had it all our lives. People can't imagine it coming to an end. And that was really partly what the Green Growth debate was about earlier. And I just wanted to pick up on 4 things. Well, actually, I just need to say, foolishly on my blog a while ago, I made a prediction that capitalism wouldn't exist in 50 years' time. Now, I was hedging my bets. I know how resilient capitalism is. And those of you who know David Harvey, who's the Marxist, who has a really long track record of talking about capital, Marxist capital. I was looking at a thing that he was saying recently in terms of capitalism crisis. Capitalism is almost in a constant state of crisis. It lurches from one crisis to another. And the crisis that we have at the moment just happens to be bigger than previous crises. But what David Harvey said, and it was very perceptive, was that capitalism never resolves the crises. What it does is it actually finds a way around it. So if you imagine these crises as a kind of roadblock that's blocking the future, what capitalism doesn't resolve the crisis, it just finds a way around it. And capitalism is very good at that, it's very resilient. But there are certain things going on at the moment which I don't think capitalism will be able to find a way around, and I just want to say briefly what those are. I think the first thing will be obvious to everybody, and that's the big elephant in the room, climate change. We all know what's happening with climate change. We've had a recent report about the Arctic ice disappearing. We know we're getting more and more severe weather events. We've had this severe drought in America, which has affected wheat production and so on. We've had the flooding in our own country. So we're getting these more and more severe and freakish weather events that are happening more frequently. Now those are bound to have a large effect on the capitalist economy globally, not just here, but globally. They're going to have a significant effect. And I think the second thing I wanted to mention is resource depletion. We all know, I'm sure, about peak oil. We're all aware of that. Capitalism, that oil oils the wheels of capitalism. It's really important in making the wheels of capitalism go around, the transport of goods and so on and so forth. And it's the only economically viable way of transporting goods large distances. Now, the thing about peak oil is that once you reach the peak, the actual decline is very rapid and it happens quite quickly. And there's a lot of disputes at the moment about whether we're at that peak or not. Various people have suggested that we possibly are, but the figures are being fiddled by the Saudis who claim they've got billions of barrels, but in fact they haven't actually got that. I mean, I don't think the answer is we just don't know at the moment. But I think the other important point is it's not just about oil by any means. I work in waste management and recycling. And because I do that, I know that there's more gold in a ton of mobile phones than there is in a ton of ore from a gold mine. And a lot of these resources being wasted, and a lot of it's still going into landfill, it's still being thrown away. And if you think about the things that we all know and love, like mobile phones, iPads, laptops and stuff like that, a lot of those things depend on rare metals, not just gold, but other rare metals, not just gold and platinum, not just the really valuable ones, but rare metals, rare earth metals to function. And those things are finite and they're becoming scarcer. There was a report to the House of Parliament recently by MPs which said that in this country we're wasting annually 600 million pounds worth in terms of resources from things like this that are just being thrown away. But the thing is that it's not just about oil. There are a lot of other things which our economy depends on to function the way it does at the moment, which are becoming a lot scarcer. So it's the limits to growth that we're thinking about here. We cannot continue to have continuing capital accumulation and compound growth. We're running up against these resource buffers, which is really important to us as eco-socialists. Another thing I would mention is, people I'm sure are aware of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is basically a response to falling profitability, which began to bite in the 1970s. So basically, the capitalists said, the 1%, whatever you want to call them, to maintain levels of profitability, we've simply got to claw back wealth from the 99%. And that's basically what the neoliberal project is about. The rate of profitability is falling in capitalism, and so they need to maintain their wealth, they need to take wealth from us. And that's exactly where we are now, and where we've been going for the past 30 years. If you look at, for example, in the USA, wages have been stagnant for the past 30 years in the USA. It's not just a recent thing, this has been going on for a long time. So neoliberalism is a response to this falling profitability. But the problem is that if you look at the 20th century and the capitalist model that we've got at the moment, that is built on consumer capitalism. In the USA, 70% of the economy is about consumption. Now, the problem is that if you take away wealth from the 99%, they can't afford to consume, they can't afford to buy anything. And consumer capitalism is in real danger. That 20th century model that happened throughout the 20th century that's built the modern capitalism we've got today is in danger of falling apart because people won't be able to afford to consume. The basic problem in our economy at the moment is lack of demand. People haven't got the money to spend and their budgets are going to get squeezed even further. So consumer capitalism, there's actually one other thing I want to mention. 100 years ago, Henry Ford realised that when he was getting into the mass production of motor vehicles, that his workers couldn't afford to buy the products that he was making. And what he actually did, which is pretty enlightened for a capitalist really, was he quadrupled their wages. There was this recognition that people couldn't afford to buy these products, so there was no point in making them if nobody could afford to buy them. So that's another kind of problem that capitalism is running up against. And the final one I wanted to mention is financial capitalism. We're all familiar with this sort of Marxist model of capitalism. You know, a capitalist goes out, he buys some property, he sets up a factory, he takes on workers, he brings in raw materials, he manufactures a product. He makes a product, he sells that product, he makes money, he opens another factory, you know, and it grows in that way. And that's what people call the real, economists these days like to call the real economy. That's about making things and selling them. That's what they're always going on about. You know, we need to reorientate our economy to a more productive economy. But the problem with that is it's really messy. You know, if you're a capitalist and you've got loads of dollars, why would you bother to go out and set up a factory? You know, you've got all these, you know, people, trade unionists, you've got all the hassle of doing it. And the thing with the massive growth that we've had in financial capitalism in the past 30 years, we're now in a situation where if you are a capitalist and you want to make money, the easiest way to do it is to invest your money in financial capitalism. It's much easier to, you can get better returns by doing it, or you have been able to probably fairly recently. It's much easier to do that. And the other thing is property. If you know, we know about the property boom that's happened in the USA, here. There's a property boom going on in China at the moment. You know, people go on about the Chinese economy is going to lead us all out of this. But the Chinese economy is growing in an unsustainable boom in the way that other economies have grown. And the chances are that will hit the buffers. And I think that the important thing, and this is quite an important point about financial capitalism, is because of deregulation of, you had the Big Bang in 1987 here, the famous thing in America that everybody talks about is the Glass-Steagall Act, which was repealed during the Clinton era, which separated investment banking from retail banking. That was scrapped. So you've had this huge, yeah, nearly finished. You've had this huge amount of deregulation, and financial capitalism mushroomed. The actual, there are actually, you know, people say there's no money. There are tens and tens of trillions of dollars in the world, but it's all tied up in financial capitalism. And the actual proportion of capitalism, which is actually about productive uses, which I talked about earlier, has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk as this huge financial bubble has grown. And there are unimaginable amounts of money sloshing around. So, on many, many different levels, capitalism has got serious problems. And what I would like us to talk about, I mean, I can pose the problems, I don't have all the answers. But one of the things I'd like to talk about tonight is how do we move on when the crash comes? Because I think we are heading for a big crunch. And I think we talk about climate change denial. Well, there is this kind of economic denial going on where we're all thinking, well, we'll get back to business as usual in 10 years' time. I don't think we're ever going to get back to business as usual. It's not going to happen. We need to wake up and realise that. We need to start planning for a different kind of economy altogether. And some people have suggested how that might work. I could give a couple of examples, but you want me to wind up. So perhaps we can talk about that later.
Thank you very much, Charles. Are you sure? Fine. Okay. Do come in, Jane, there's 6 around here. While everyone's thinking about putting their hand up to make a contribution or ask a question, everyone's settled. We haven't got enough air. If not, flap your copy of the watermelon. It's multifunctional. And remember on the back, there's the advert for October the 20th, which you're all going to build for the region. Okay, wide-ranging, and as some candidates were saying in their campaign, the economic and ecological crisis are 2 sides of the same coin, or 2 sides of the same struggle. And I think we will probably agree with that in this room. So, any contributions, comments, or questions? Doesn't matter. A mixture. I want gender balance. Mum, we're all friends here. Yes. Just say your name and.
Thank you. Constantine Buchan, Camden. I went covered the Greek election when I was still am until tomorrow a member of the International Committee and wrote a report. I followed Syriza very closely. I went there to follow the Greek Green Party, which was abysmally non-existent. We are in alliance with them in the European Green Party, it's their sister party, and they were appallingly absent. They had some very good people. I stuck very closely with Syriza. And there's some things which are very strong in them, there's some things which we should be aware of. We should be aware of, first of all, that there's a lot of people from PASOK who went into Syriza because they saw them rising. The same happened here. We have Labour who came to the Green Party. But Labour came because they're out of principle, because they had ideals, and they came here at grassroots level to this party. There's the other way around. They have joined in their thousands Syriza because they think they can get a job for nothing. I heard them, I speak the language, I heard them talking about it. And that we should be very careful. The strong points. They really are the force for change. Whereas our sister party was standing for federal Europe, for the euro, for ever closer integration, they stood for keeping out of the euro, perhaps defaulting, perhaps they had a variety of policies and alternatives, which was very inspiring. And they also have an extremely young basis. 75%, I think, of the voters were under 35. Can you imagine this potential? How it's going to surge? So it's when we tackle Syriza, there's the enthusiastic and there's the caution, which I would say. Read my reports. Just one final thing. You mentioned the fall of the Roman Empire. Well, of course, it moved from the Latin west to the Greek east in Byzantium. And had you told the Byzantines they were going to fall in 20 years' time, they would have said, I'm surprised we haven't collapsed already.
Thank you, Constance. Can I just one little thing I'll say, because when I was with Alexis Tsipras before he was world famous, I must admit that the conversation in the room in his offices that we had there was not so much anti-Euro at all. They felt that, in actual fact, by demanding to stay within the Euro, that they would have more control. They didn't actually say, have Merkel buy her ghoulies or anything like that, crudely. But they felt that by demanding to stay within the EU, that they could make sure that the whole of the Eurozone took responsibility for where they had got to properly. It doesn't look very likely now, but just a point I wanted to correct on that, really. Any other comments on any other aspects or contributions for now, or you want to mull it all over to the end? Haroon and then...
I just want to pick up on what Howard is saying.
You just introduced...
Sorry, yeah, I'm Haroon Stark, Northern Forest.
Yeah,
Northern Forest and Redbridge. Thanks very much, Howard. I mean, look, I fully agree with your analysis, so I don't want to sort of dwell on that.
Yeah.
But just 3 points. Firstly, I think that whilst you're right, and I agree with you about the fact that there's been a series of crises, you can look at it and see historically it is. But I think we've arrived at a really important point, because what's unique about this crisis is that we have a huge amount of surplus labour, which is normal, but we also have a huge amount of surplus capital. I mean, if you look at the figures, there's about 2 trillion parked capital. It doesn't know where to go. And that's, I think, significant. That's the first point. Secondly, I think this crisis has perhaps, the first time, actually exposed the financial oligarchy in a way that no previous crisis has actually exposed it. But at the same time, by exposing it, I think it's actually set us a really, really significant challenge. That is, how do we as citizens contend and challenge that oligarchical power? And I think that is the real political challenge we should be addressing within Green Left and the Green Party. And the third point I think I want to make in relation to what you were saying about the demise of capitalism and how it'll be dead in 20 years. The only 55, but I mean, look, the worrying thing, the really worrying thing, and again for us in terms of our green aspects, is that we're seeing already a shift in land grab to Latin America, land grab in Africa. We're seeing an ocean grab of huge dimensions taking place, backed by European money, in particular the ocean side of it. That, in a sense, I fear, is going to give capitalism a longer life than maybe we would expect it to, because that is what part of the process will be. But in the process of that, my big fear is that that will actually mean that the demise of capitalism is also linked to the demise of sustainable ecology.
Andy from the Virginia Green Party, and I'd just like to sort of underline a point that Howard made about the fact, I think, rather than use the word crisis, I think perhaps the term tipping point is more significant, because I think we're reaching a point where things could change much quicker than the vast majority of people realise. I mean, I was brought up as from a Polish background, and I was taught all the way through my life until a certain point that the Berlin Wall was there forever and stuff like that, and then it came crashing down literally overnight. And I think we're reaching a point where both the climate crisis, the evidence, I mean, I'm also a geography and geologist, and the evidence is that when things change, they change very, very quickly. It's not going to be a sort of long, slow, gradual transition into the new climate. And the same with the sort of social and political stability that we've got. Things come crashing down very, very quickly. Civilizations come crashing down, not over periods of centuries or decades even. They come crashing down in the space of weeks and months. So I don't want to be completely dystopian about things, but I think if we're going to have a role in shaping the future, we need to, I mentioned earlier to Howard in the pub that one thing that alarms me about the Green Party at this point in time is I'm not sure we're in a position that when it becomes crashing down to actually step into the void and actually pick up the reins, as much as we might like to kid ourselves that we've got the right answer and so on. We need to really get our act together to actually be prepared to sort of step into that void as and when it happens.
Thanks very much. Are there any women who come out speaking? Because I know you've all got things to say while you're thinking about it.
Jay Blackwood from Bristol branch. I mean, obviously I agree with almost everything Howard said, but I think there's one thing that I'm not entirely sure about, which is if you talk about capitalism having such and such a length of time. There was a book published by Ernest Mandel about 40 years ago called Late Capitalism, and somebody drew a cartoon in response with a couple of characters talking about it, saying you don't call something late until it actually died. And there's this, I think capitalism is incredibly robust as a system, and it's incredibly flexible. And the solutions, I mean, I agree, I can't see how it gets out of the bind it's in at the moment, except by imposing incredibly brutal solutions. But it will impose those solutions. And the analogy with the Roman Empire, in a way, is interesting. The Roman Empire didn't just fall because of internal contradictions, it fell because it had internal contradictions, and the barbarians were literally matching their events. And I think, as the previous speaker said, unless we and the left in general get our act together to actually provide some kind of political current and direction and leadership, what worries me is capitalism will, even in the face of climate catastrophe, impose a solution, and that solution will be incredibly brutal and barbaric. So I think there are no, I'm sure you won't say this, but there are no foregone conclusions about capitalism collapsing.
Yeah, would you do
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I think two things. I mean, I was a bit cheeky. I said 50 years because I knew I wouldn't be around, so nobody would be able to tell me that. Yeah, so I was kind of hedging my bets a bit there. But what I meant was that certainly capitalism as we know it now won't be around in 50 years. And I think we need at some stage in this debate to talk about what we think is going to happen. And I think you're absolutely right. It could be fascism, you know, it could go really badly, and it could be very brutal solutions imposed on people. We've got to try and find the alternative.
And I would just say, so thank Howard for his contribution there, that what is very frightening is the rise of the Golden Dawn in Greece, that are now the third polling party in the country, and it's very easy for people when they're doing sort of fear-mongering in order to be very simplistic and put forward ideas that will attract people to these dreadful simplistic ideologies. And we do have to work very, very hard to make sure that these don't win out and that vulnerable groups are not scapegoated, as our condemned government are doing with people with disability benefits or anybody requiring benefits at all. And this is part of the slippery slope. Labour are not helping at all and trying to backtrack on what they have said and planned on immigration in the past. So there's a lot of work for us to do on all fronts, and we've got to fight them on all fronts. There's 6 million people coming to see. I don't know if you can see one day, you'd be happy up there. So thanks very much again to Howard, and I'm sure we'll be chatting about these issues perhaps later on when we're having refreshments. So thanks again, Howard. And I would like us to welcome Derek Wall, our new international coordinator, to give us some of his thoughts and perhaps spark a little bit of debate and discussion as well this evening. Thank you, Derek.